There's been a ton of talk of this new era of supersport motorcycles. Whether you like it or not, a lot of middleweight sport bikes are being supplanted by an entirely new breed of motorcycle. On the smaller portion of the segment, you have bikes like the R7, the GSX-8R, or the Triumph Daytona 660, blending supersport style with more street-oriented power delivery and ergonomics, and borrowing parts from naked bikes. A sin in the eyes of Rossi, but we will overlook it for today's video. In the bigger side of the supersport segment, you have bikes like the new R9 and Ducati Panigale V2. These machines have larger displacements and fewer cylinders, and while they're designed to compete in supersport racing, they're going to be more street-friendly than the dedicated 4-cylinder supersport motorcycles that came before them. But in today's video, we're going to wipe away all the new changes in the industry that we've seen and take a look at some true blue supersport motorcycles and how ridiculously high horsepower some of them got. Because regardless of the direction the industry has taken, a ton of people still go nuts for these machines, and they hold a special place in the annals of motorcycle history. Let's get into it. Well, if we're going to talk about 600s, you'd think we're starting off strong with the YZF-R6. The R6 is the best 600 in the world, right? Right? The R6 is the best motorcycle ever made, right? But no, we're actually going to start it off with the CBR 600RR. Supersport from Honda that's had no issue holding its own for the last 20 years and has recently seen a bit of a renaissance in the European market. Honda debuted the CBR 600RR in 2003, adopting an entirely different strategy compared to the CBR 600 F4i that came before it. The F4i was deliberately practical. You can think of it as the original not-so-supersport machine, and you can still see lineages and traces of that bike in the new CBR 650R. It held its own on the racetrack while being far more enjoyable for street use compared to its competitors. But as the supersport dogfight intensified, Honda wanted to reimagine what the capabilities of a middleweight machine could be. Instead of building a race bike out of a street bike, the CBR 600RR was a race bike from the ground up. It was actually heavily inspired by the RC211V MotoGP bike, using an aluminum frame, inverted fork, and rear suspension setup that looked strikingly similar to what had been finessed by Honda's GP racing program. The 599cc inline-4 makes about 117 horsepower and can, in theory, reach speeds nearing of 160 miles an hour if you had enough runway. The CBR 600RR was updated here and there with improvements to the suspension and chassis and general weight reduction. In the mid-2000s, it won multiple Best Sport Bike awards from publications like Motorcycle Magazine and Motorcycle News. It had plenty of success in World Supersport as well, having attributed to 8 different rider championships over the last 20 years. When highly tuned for racing, these 599cc Hondas are able to make 140 horsepower to the rear tire. There are some racers who have chronicled their race bike builds online, and after extensive mods show that a spicy 140 figure proven on the dyno chart, which is every squid's wet dream. Show the dyno chart, show the horsepower to the tire. A 599cc engine pushed the absolute limit is not going to last very long, but that's in the name of the game when it comes to racing. Prior to the adoption of the 765cc Triumph triples in Moto 2 in 2019, the 599cc inline 4-cylinder from Honda had been the standardized power plant since 2010. If its prevalence in racing hadn't shown the CBR 600RR's merit, maybe this next little factoid will. The team at DynoJet built a turbocharged CBR 600RR and went 206 miles an hour at the Bonneville Salt Flats, which has to be the fastest any 600 has ever gone. I mean, 206 miles an hour on a 600 is pretty crazy. It's probably one of the few times a 600 ever saw 200 miles an hour. Traditional 4-cylinder 600s are becoming more of a rarity in the current motorcycle landscape, and many have been discontinued in Europe and other markets, and like the R6, discontinued entirely. But this kind of makes the CBR 600RR a bit of an odd duck. It was initially discontinued entirely around 2017, but then it was brought back in Japan in 2021 and in Europe in 2024. In these markets, the bike has been significantly updated as well, which makes us here in North America a little jealous, if I'm not gonna lie, with new styling, updated tech like an IMU and a TFT dash. It's been brought back in the US as well, but essentially in the same spec as the old model from 2016, without the upgrades that the Asian and European model gets. So it's a bit confusing, but what can you do? Okay, now that we got that out of the way, we can discuss the R6, because while I didn't want this to be an R6 worship video, its existence is entirely too significant to be put off any longer. The R6 is arguably the most legendary 600 known to man. It's been revered by racers and street squids alike. This motorcycle was first released in 1999 and was a significant leap forward for Yamaha performance-oriented sport bikes. The 599cc inline 4 from the R6 was the first, making about 108 horsepower upon this bike's release, and if memory serves me correctly, it was the first 600 to make over 100 horsepower from the factory. This was thanks hugely in part to its ability to rev to 15,500 RPM. The high revving nature of the R6 would become part of its lasting allure. The R6 was continuously refined over the years with improvements to performance and handling. Its first major overhaul was in 2006 when the bike received the highly innovative fly-by-wire throttle, variable intake system, updated frame, improved aero, and the infamously inaccurate 17,500 RPM tachometer redline. At the peak of its abilities, the R6 was making 127 horsepower at the crank. Most people would say that the 2008 vintage was the best one to get, and I'd be inclined to agree. The YZF-R6 has been incredibly successful in racing, one could say the most winning 600 of all time. In World Supersport alone, Yamaha has won 10 championships since the R6 debuted in 1999. The French-based team GMT94 has been a Yamaha-backed organization in varying capacities since 1991. They competed in the World Endurance Championship for 16 years before moving to World Supersport as a Yamaha team in 2019. Before switching to the R9, GMT94 had a fully built R6 that was making 153 horsepower and weighing in at 356 pounds, bordering on 2-stroke power-to-weight ratio. That is an astonishingly high power figure for a 600. If you guys can't put that into perspective, an R1 was making about that kind of power back in the early 2000s. So to make that out of a 600 while weighing 356 pounds is ridiculous. The Tenkate Racing team, the Yamaha-supported team that won the 2021 and 2022 World Supersport Championships, had of course masterminded their own Ultimate R6 racing build. Their fully fledged racing platform pushes over 140 ponies as well. Not only have they built the Ultimate Race R6 for their own efforts, they've made entire R6 competition race kits available for purchase as well for privateer race teams or independent racers, or the local track guy who wants to show off his $40,000 competition spec Yamaha R6 just to get passed on the outside by a 13-year-old on a Ninja 400 that's basically bone stock. The Yamaha R6 has been replaced by the R9 in World Supersport and has disappeared from Yamaha's lineup as a street-legal motorcycle. But due to its tenure as a super sport track weapon, the R6 is still sold in a track-only variant, so its legacy can live on in various racing circuits. But I imagine now that the R9 has supplanted it in World Supersport, we probably won't see R6s for sale for much longer.
If you've been watching the channel for a while, you're bound to know that we're partial to rock form handlebar mounts and phone cases around here. I'll always keep a mount on the giveaway bike as well as my personal bike, which always comes in handy if I'm doing a longer ride where I need GPS navigation. Just when I thought Rockform's lineup of motorcycle products couldn't get any better, I'm excited to share with you that they've just recently released a brand new mounting system that maximizes your options for adjustability and convenience. The new Pro Ball mount is the most functional mounting system yet. It uses a universal handlebar mount that's compatible with handlebar diameters from 7/8 all the way to 1.5 inches, includes 5 different spacers to ensure a perfect fit. The double ball joint provides endless options for adjustability, so you can get the perfect viewing angle no matter what your bike setup is like. The Pro Ball mount is made of CNC aircraft grade aluminum with stainless steel hardware, so it's built to stand the test of time no matter how aggressive your riding is. The Rockform Pro Ball mount is an awesome addition to the line of products, so if you haven't gotten a Rockform mount yet or you're looking for an upgrade, click the link in the description and use the code YN25 to receive 25% off your order. That's 25% off using code YN25. Thanks so much to Rockform for the continued support on the channel. Now let's get back to the show.
The Kawasaki ZX-6R is a widely celebrated 600 class sport bike. It's been enjoyed by track dudes, highway roll racers, and stunt guys alike for 30 years. It was first released in 1995 to meet the rising demand for high performance middleweight sport bikes. It originally used a 599cc inline 4 that made right around 100 horsepower, but in 2003, Kawasaki made the bold move of increasing the displacement to 636 cc's, which gave the ZX-6R a competitive edge with extra torque and mid-range power. Leave it to Kawasaki to never play by anyone's rules and always just like randomly do weird stuff. I feel like that's Kawasaki's whole MO.
I like you, but you're crazy.
The ZX-6R was sold until 2012, which retained the 599cc displacement, which was for homologated purposes to go racing, and since then, limited amounts have been produced and sold to factory race teams to compete in World Supersport. For the better part of the last 2 decades, the ZX-6R has been capable of producing nearly 130 horsepower at the crank, which is pretty fantastic for a street-going 600. Over the years, most people considered the ZX-6R to be one of the best street-going 600s, and I'd be inclined to agree. I gave one away in 2022, and I thought it was a really great motorcycle. Over the years, Kawasaki has improved the aluminum perimeter frame and the suspension components to sharpen the overall geometry. The ZX-6R makes for a more balanced and streetable sport bike compared to its competition, not just because of the beefier power delivery, but because of its competitive tech package nowadays too. The CBR600RR and the GSX-R600 are both being sold in the US as relics of an entirely different era. Just true blue 600cc sport bikes with limited tech or convenience features. I mean, the Gixxer doesn't even come with ABS, whereas the ZX-6R has adjustable traction control, quick shifter up and down, ABS, and a full color TFT. It just feels way more suited as a modern motorcycle. But we're not talking about the most technologically equipped or value-driven 600 today, we're talking about the most powerful. And oftentimes, as we've seen with the CBR600RR or the R6, the most powerful bikes are often the most successful in racing. And Kawasaki has had their fair share of success with the ZX-6 in World Supersport. They currently have a 636cc ZX-6 on the grid with full displacement thanks to the new next-gen Supersport rule changes, which in a nutshell basically allows for bikes like the Panigale V2, Triumph 765, and the Agusta F3800 and other oddball displacement bikes to all compete using a throttle limiter. The built-up racing machine produces 145 horsepower and weighs 357 pounds. The last time a Kawasaki won the championship was in 2016 with Kenan Sofuoglu, who is the manager of Toprak Razgatlioglu, you might have heard of him, aboard a ZX-6R. There's still quite a few ZX-6Rs racing in Moto America Supersports as well, with it being one of the few 600s still left on the grid amidst the R9s, V2s, and GSX-R 750s. Okay, I'm gonna bend my own rules a little bit for the last bike on the list today and talk about the Triumph Daytona 675R. And that's for 2 reasons. One, I love that bike. I've owned many of them. I think like 5 at this point. I've raced them, I've tracked them, I rode them on the street. I was recently reunited with my last Daytona that I regretted selling, so it just seems fitting. Secondly, I am bending the rules because while the Daytona isn't 600cc's and it isn't a 4-cylinder, it really existed perfectly within that era, racing alongside those bikes in various racing events. So even though it's not on paper an actual 600, it's very much more similar to a real 600 than the larger displacement twins and triples we see in the World Supersport paddock today. The Triumph Daytona 675R is often hailed as one of the most distinctive and refined middleweight sport bikes ever produced. First introduced in 2011 as the premium version of the already very impressive Daytona 675, the 675R took Triumph's 675cc triple platform and dialed it up with high-end components, making it a serious competitor against the Japanese 600cc inline 4s. By its final production year, it was making 128 horsepower and 55 foot-pounds of torque, while weighing just 405 pounds wet and ready to ride. As a personal note, I've weighed my track-going Daytona, and it's sitting right at around 364 pounds ready to ride, and with a full system and a flashed ECU, it probably makes about 120-something to the wheel. It's a ton of fun to ride, and it's super nice. Unlike the peaky, high-strung Japanese 4-cylinders, the Daytona has a broad, linear power band that really combines the best elements of a 2-cylinder and a 4-cylinder engine. The Daytona's had its fair share of racing credits as well, having been used in the Isle of Man TT, British Supersport, World Supersport, and AMA Supersport Racing series. Despite the Daytona's prowess, it was never as successful as the Japanese competition, if we're going to be honest. Trying to consistently meet new regulations, homologation exceptions, and balancing rules put in place to allow it to compete with a larger engine was challenging. Even when allowed, regulatory uncertainty or changes in the balancing formulas year to year made it harder for Triumph to stay competitive consistently. Japanese manufacturers, on the other hand, didn't face this barrier because their bikes were built specifically for that 600cc spec. Triumph also never had the factory racing budget that Honda, Yamaha, or Kawasaki have. Daytonas were raced by privateers or semi-factory supported teams without the full support of a real factory race program. So they just had fewer resources to continue developing their efforts, but that doesn't mean that the Daytona 675 wasn't one of the most powerful and special 600s ever made. And for a guy like me who just likes riding on track, I don't race as much anymore, it's just super sweet to hear a 3-cylinder motor revving to nearly 15,000 RPM. It just is really nice and fun to ride. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. What's your favorite 600? The R6? Yeah, how did I know? Let the comments down below know about how all the new super sports are not real race bikes officially commence. Fact, horses can sleep both standing up and lying down. Goodbye.
Keep watching Yami Nerd.